Solve it before midnight, and I will marry you. Professor Claire Harrington said it with a laugh, one hand still resting against the edge of the whiteboard while 20 graduate students stared at a wall of equations that had defeated them for nearly 2 hours. It was 9:17 at night inside Harrington Hall, and the old Boston building had gone quiet except for the low hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional click of a laptop key, and the soft squeak of a cleaning cart rolling near the back wall. Claire was 42, white, tenured, respected, and accustomed to being the smartest person in most rooms she entered. Tonight, even she looked tired. A cold cup of coffee sat beside her open laptop. On the board, an optimization model stretched across 4 panels in black and blue marker, filled with constraints, coefficients, and a projected minimum that nobody had managed to justify. A few students laughed at her joke. Nathan Cole, a postdoctoral researcher, leaned back in his chair. "Careful, Professor. Someone might actually solve it." Claire smiled. "At this point, I would respect the effort." Near the last row, Marcus Reed lifted a trash liner from a bin and tied it shut. He was 36, black, wearing a dark facilities polo, work pants, and an identification badge clipped near his waist. His cleaning gloves were tucked into one pocket. He had been moving quietly through the room for 10 minutes, replacing liners and wiping the side tables while the seminar continued around him. Nobody had asked him to leave because almost nobody had noticed him. Marcus looked at the board once. Then again, his hand stopped on the handle of the cleaning cart. Claire continued speaking. "The objective is simple enough. Minimize total cost while maintaining the capacity requirements and the service constraint. The problem is that every feasible solution we have tested violates something downstream." Emily Shaw, a doctoral student in the front row, rubbed her forehead. "The solver keeps pushing us back into the same corner." "Because the corner is wrong," Marcus said. The sentence was quiet, but the room had become quiet enough to hear it. A few heads turned. Claire paused. "Excuse me." Marcus looked toward the third line of constraints. "You do not have to wait until midnight." Nathan smiled as if Marcus had made a joke. Claire did not. "I am sorry." Marcus stepped away from the cart, but did not approach the board. The third constraint contradicts the objective under the assumptions written above it. The room changed in a way Marcus recognized immediately. Before, he had been part of the furniture. Now every face was measuring him. Claire looked first at his facilities badge, then at the cleaning cart, then finally at his face. "Do you work in this building?" "At night." Someone near the middle row gave a short laugh. Marcus did not look toward the sound. Claire folded her arms. "And you believe you found the issue?" "I believe the model is counting the same capacity twice." Nathan turned toward the board. "It is not." Marcus nodded once. "Then the numbers should prove me wrong." Claire stared at him for a moment. There was no arrogance in his expression. That almost made the interruption more irritating. "This model was built by 3 doctoral researchers. That does not change the constraint." The room went still again. Claire picked up a black marker from the tray beneath the board. She held it out toward him. "All right." Marcus looked at the marker, then at her. "Is this about the mathematics?" Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. What else would it be about? "Entertainment." A few students stopped smiling. Claire extended the marker another inch. "Solve it." Marcus walked toward the front of the room. The wheels of the cleaning cart settled behind him with a faint metallic click. He took the marker from Claire, turned toward the board, and circled one number. Then he said, "This is where the problem starts." Marcus kept the marker against the board and drew a short line beneath the number he had circled. "This capacity term appears here," he said, "and then it appears again inside the service constraint." Nathan Cole leaned forward. "That is intentional. The second term represents reserve capacity." Marcus nodded. "Then it should be defined as reserve capacity." Nathan's mouth tightened. "It is obvious from the structure." "Not mathematically." Claire watched Marcus from 2 steps away. Up close, she noticed that he was not staring at the equations like someone guessing. His eyes moved from one line to another with the rhythm of a person checking a familiar language. Still, the dark facilities polo and the cleaning cart behind him kept pulling at the frame through which she was seeing him. "You clean this building, correct?" she asked. Marcus looked at her. "At night." "That was not what I asked." "Yes, I clean this building." A student near the windows smiled into his coffee cup. Marcus ignored him. Claire pointed toward the board. "And you are telling a room full of graduate researchers that the model has a basic structural error." I am telling you the written model counts one resource twice. Nathan stood and walked closer. No. The second appearance is constrained by the allocation variable. Marcus turned back to the board. Only if that variable is independent. It is. Marcus drew a box around two symbols. Then why is it defined here as a function of the first capacity variable? Nathan stopped. Emily Shaw looked down at her laptop and scrolled quickly through the model notes. Claire glanced toward her. Emily, I am checking. The room filled with soft keyboard clicks. Marcus capped the marker for a moment, then looked toward Claire. If you substitute the definition from the second panel into this constraint, the same capacity enters twice. Claire stepped closer to the board. That still does not prove the optimum is wrong. I did not say it did. Then what exactly are you saying? Marcus uncapped the marker again. That you may have spent 2 hours optimizing a feasible region that is not actually feasible. The sentence landed harder than he delivered it. Nobody laughed this time. Claire felt something sharp move behind her ribs, not embarrassment exactly, but resistance. This was her workshop, her model, her students. She had spent weeks refining the formulation with Nathan and Emily. The idea that a man replacing trash liners had found the first real crack in it within minutes felt absurd before it felt possible. Where did you learn optimization? She asked. Marcus looked at the board instead of at her. Does the answer change if I say nowhere? Credentials matter. For hiring, yes. He tapped the circled term. For whether this is duplicated, no. Emily's hand stopped over the keyboard. Professor. Claire turned. Emily rotated her laptop. He is right about the dependency. Nathan crossed his arms. About the notation, maybe. Not just the notation, Emily said. When I substitute the definition, the capacity is double counted in the constraint matrix. Claire leaned toward the screen. The reflected equations washed pale light across her face. She traced the rows once, then again. Marcus stood quietly near the board, marker in hand, while the cleaning cart remained behind him like a label the room had suddenly stopped trusting. Claire straightened. All right. You found an error. Marcus nodded. Yes. Nathan exhaled. That is not the same as solving the problem. Marcus looked toward him. No. Then he turned back to the board and erased one line. It means you were solving the wrong one. Claire stared at the erased line as if Marcus had removed something larger than a piece of notation. Then rebuild it, she said. The room shifted again. Marcus looked at her. Rebuild the model? You said we were solving the wrong one. Claire picked up a second marker and placed it on the tray beneath the board. Show us the right one. Nathan let out a quiet breath. Professor, we do not need to turn this into a performance. Marcus glanced toward him. I agree. Claire heard the answer and understood exactly where it landed. She folded her arms. This is not a performance. Marcus looked at the students, then at the cleaning cart waiting near the back wall. A bottle of disinfectant caught the fluorescent light. 10 minutes ago, nobody in this room knew I could read the board. Claire's expression tightened. 10 minutes ago, you had not said anything. That is true. So say something now. Marcus studied her for a moment, then uncapped the marker. All right. He returned to the first panel and drew a clean vertical line through the duplicated capacity term. Start here. If this resource is already represented in the base constraint, then the reserve term cannot inherit the same full coefficient without shrinking the feasible region twice. Nathan shook his head. That assumes reserve demand is dependent. Marcus pointed to the definition above it. Your own notation makes it dependent. Emily leaned closer to her laptop. Marcus continued before anyone could interrupt. So separate the reserve requirement from the primary capacity variable. Then rewrite the service constraint using the residual capacity, not the original total. He wrote one expression beneath the old model, then another. No flourish, no dramatic pause, just compact algebra, each line following the last. Claire moved nearer. The smell of dry marker mixed with the faint lemon scent from Marcus's cleaning supplies. You are reducing the dimensionality, she said. Marcus nodded. Because one variable is not actually independent. Nathan stepped toward the board. If you eliminate it, you change the boundary. Yes. Marcus drew a small coordinate sketch beside the equations. That is the point. He marked the original feasible region, then shaded a smaller one beneath it. Your solver keeps returning to this corner because the duplicated term makes the model think this is the cheapest legal point. Emily looked at her screen. But if the dependency is removed, that corner disappears. Marcus turned toward her. Exactly. Claire's eyes moved between the diagram and the formulas. She could feel the irritation leaving and something more uncomfortable taking its place. Attention. Real attention. She was no longer wondering why the janitor was speaking. She was wondering how far ahead of them he had already gone. What happens to the objective value? She asked. Marcus looked at the clock. 9:26. It increases at first. Nathan gave a quick smile. Then it is worse. Marcus shook his head. More expensive is not the same as worse if the cheaper solution was impossible. The smile disappeared. Claire looked down at the cold coffee beside her laptop, then back at the board. Can you solve the corrected model? Marcus paused. Yes. Without the solver? For this version. Nathan laughed once, but nobody joined him. Claire reached for the black marker Marcus had been using, then stopped herself. How long? Marcus looked at the remaining equations. If the assumptions above the objective are accurate, about 15 minutes. Claire glanced at the clock. You have until 9:45. Marcus raised one eyebrow. I thought I had until midnight. A few students smiled carefully. Claire did not. You said we would not need that long. Marcus turned back to the board. We will not. He erased another line, and this time the entire room leaned forward. Marcus drew a short horizontal line beneath the corrected constraint and began rewriting the system from the top. The room stayed quiet enough to hear the marker drag across the whiteboard. Claire watched his hand move without hesitation. He did not copy the original model. He stripped it down. One variable disappeared. A second changed definition. The capacity term Nathan had defended was rewritten as residual capacity instead of total capacity. You are assuming the resource cannot be reused across the same service window, Nathan said. Marcus stopped writing. No, I am using the assumption already written here. He tapped the second panel. You defined the service window as simultaneous. Nathan looked toward Emily. That was shorthand. Marcus turned slightly. Then shorthand changed the mathematics. Emily lowered her eyes to her laptop and began typing. Claire stepped closer to the board. Keep going. Marcus drew two inequalities and labeled the new boundary. Once the duplicated term is removed, this point is no longer feasible. He circled the corner solution that the class had been chasing for most of the evening. The solver was not failing. It was answering the model exactly as written. Claire looked at the circled point, and the model was asking the wrong question. Marcus nodded. Yes. Nathan folded his arms. You still have not shown the corrected optimum. I am getting there. Marcus wrote a substitution beneath the objective function. Because this variable is monotonic over the valid region, the minimum has to occur on one of these two boundaries. Claire's expression changed. She knew the step. More importantly, she knew it was right. You can reduce it to 2 candidate points, she said. 3, Marcus replied. The service floor creates one more intersection. Claire looked again. He marked the third point. She had missed it. So had everyone else. Emily turned her laptop toward Nathan. He is right. The third intersection is active after the dependency correction. Nathan stared at the screen. That still does not prove global optimality. Marcus capped the marker and looked at him. No, convexity does. Nathan's face tightened. Marcus uncapped the marker again and wrote the Hessian structure in 4 compact lines. He did not fill the board with calculation. He only wrote enough to show the sign pattern. Claire read it before he finished. Positive semi-definite, she said quietly. Marcus nodded. Across the feasible region. Emily leaned back in her chair. One of the students near the wall whispered, "That is clean." Marcus ignored the comment. He calculated the first candidate point, crossed it out after testing the service constraint, then moved to the second. The wall clock clicked to 9:34. Claire had stopped looking at the facilities badge clipped near his waist. She was watching the sequence now, nothing else. Marcus reached the third point and paused. This is the only candidate that satisfies all 3 active conditions without violating reserve capacity. Nathan stepped closer. What value? Marcus wrote the result beneath the objective. Emily entered it into her laptop. A few seconds later, she said, "It is lower than the corrected boundary estimate." Claire looked at Marcus. "By how much?" Emily answered before he did. "Just under 8%. The room went silent again. Marcus drew a box around the number. "That is your candidate optimum." Nathan shook his head. "Candidate?" Marcus turned toward him. "Yes, because I have not checked sensitivity yet." Claire almost smiled. You are being careful now? Marcus looked at her. I was careful before. The answer landed without heat. Claire glanced at the clock. 9:37. Then check it. Marcus moved to the final open section of the board and wrote one more line. If this coefficient stays within the range you gave us, the solution holds. Emily began testing the range. Claire stood beside Marcus, close enough to smell faint disinfectant on his sleeve beneath the dry marker scent. 10 minutes earlier, she had thought she was indulging a janitor. Now she was waiting for him to finish an argument none of her researchers had seen. Emily's laptop gave a soft chime. She looked up slowly. The solution is stable. Marcus set the marker on the tray. Then the first problem is solved. Claire heard the word first and looked at him. First, Marcus turned toward the assumptions written above the objective. Yes. He pointed to one line Claire herself had added weeks earlier. Because this one may be worse. Claire followed Marcus's finger to the assumption he had marked. For the first time that evening, she did not answer immediately. The line looked ordinary enough. A projected service efficiency gain applied across the later periods of the model. She had written it herself 6 weeks earlier after reviewing preliminary operational data. Nathan glanced at the board. That assumption is fine. Marcus looked at him. What supports it? Historical trend. Which history? Nathan turned toward Claire as if the question belonged to her. Claire stepped closer. The department received an internal dataset showing improved service times over 3 semesters. Marcus nodded. Measured how? Average completion time. Across the same workload? Claire hesitated. Adjusted workload. Marcus looked back at the board. Adjusted by what factor? Emily had already begun searching through the project folder on her laptop. I am looking. Nathan exhaled. We are drifting away from the exercise. Marcus shook his head. No. This assumption is inside the exercise. Claire folded her arms. Explain the concern. Marcus pointed to the projected efficiency gain. If the historical improvement came from lighter workload, different staffing, or excluded cases, then this percentage is not an efficiency gain. It is a different operating condition. Nathan frowned. You are speculating. Yes. Marcus capped the marker. That is why I asked what supports it. The room grew quiet again. Claire could feel the students watching her now, not Marcus. That difference was new. She looked toward Emily. Do you have the source note? Emily scrolled. There is a citation to the operations summary, but not to the raw file. Claire's jaw tightened slightly. Open the summary. Emily did. A table appeared on the screen. Marcus did not move closer. Read the denominator. Emily stared at the page. Completed service cases. All assigned cases. It does not say. Nathan waved one hand. That does not invalidate the trend. Marcus looked at him. It means we do not know what the trend represents. Claire felt the sting of the sentence because it was true. She had used the improvement rate because the direction matched what the department expected to see. At the time, it had seemed reasonable. Tonight, under the fluorescent lights and beside a cleaning cart, reasonable suddenly sounded less solid. Suppose the assumption is weak, she said. Does it change tonight's solution? Marcus looked at the boxed optimum. Not the corrected solution we just proved under your written assumptions. Claire nodded once. Then the problem is solved. Marcus met her eyes. The classroom problem is. Nathan gave a short laugh. There. Done. Marcus did not respond to him. Claire looked again at the board. What are you saying? Marcus rested the marker on the tray. I am saying the mathematics can be correct inside a model and still be useless if the assumptions describe a world that does not exist. Emily leaned back slowly. Claire glanced toward the cold coffee beside her laptop. The room no longer felt like a seminar. It felt like an audit. You seem very comfortable saying that, she said. Marcus's expression stayed neutral. Because it happens often. Claire studied him. Where did you learn this? Marcus looked toward the clock. 9:42. Does that matter before we check the source? It matters to me. Why? Claire opened her mouth, then stopped. She already knew the answer she wanted to give. Because expertise has a history, because advanced work requires training, because rooms like this are built around credentials. But Marcus had already shown something more difficult to dismiss than a resume. Emily broke the silence. Professor. Claire turned. Emily had opened an archived methods note. The efficiency figure was calculated after excluding the highest delay cases. Claire's face changed. How many? Emily scanned the page. Roughly 18% of the observations. Nathan looked at the screen. Those were outliers. Marcus asked. Were they outliers before or after they made the trend look worse? No one answered. Claire stared at the assumption she had written weeks earlier. Marcus had stopped smiling long before the room stopped laughing. Now even Nathan was quiet. Claire looked at Marcus. You said this one might be worse. Marcus nodded. Because a wrong equation usually breaks where you can see it. He tapped the assumption gently. A believable number can survive much longer. Emily turned the archived methods note toward the room, and Claire walked closer until the screen reflected pale blue across her face. Show me exactly what was excluded, she said. Emily opened the appendix. Rows of service records appeared, followed by a filtering note written in smaller text. Marcus stayed beside the whiteboard. He did not touch the laptop. Read the rule, he said. Emily did. Cases above the 95th percentile for completion time were removed before calculating the efficiency trend. Nathan frowned. That is standard cleaning for extreme delays. Marcus looked at him. Sometimes. These were anomalies. Were they random? Nathan hesitated. Marcus continued. If the slowest cases happened because the system was under stress, then removing them also removes the evidence of stress. Claire looked at Emily. Can you restore them? Emily nodded. The raw file is linked. Do it. The room fell into another stretch of keyboard noise. Marcus turned back to the board and wrote two short expressions beneath Claire's assumption. The projected gain is being treated like an independent improvement, he said. But if the excluded cases rise with workload, then the gain is partly an artifact of which observations were allowed to remain. Claire watched the equations. So you would model delay as workload dependent. At minimum, I would test it. Nathan shook his head. You are rebuilding the entire exercise around a possibility. Marcus looked at him. No, I am checking whether the possibility is already in the data. Emily stopped typing. It is. Everyone turned. She rotated the laptop. The excluded cases are not evenly distributed. Most come from the highest volume periods. Claire leaned toward the screen. How many? Almost 70% of the removed records are from the top quartile of workload. Nathan's expression changed. Marcus did not. Then the exclusion is not neutral. Claire looked toward him. What would you use instead? Marcus lifted the marker. First, put the records back. He wrote one line. Second, estimate the service time relationship across workload bands rather than one average. Another line. Third, carry that relationship into the optimization instead of assuming a fixed improvement percentage. Claire followed the logic. That makes the objective nonlinear. Slightly. And harder to solve. Marcus nodded. Harder is allowed. One student near the back smiled, but nobody laughed. Marcus continued. You can approximate it piecewise if you want computational speed. He drew 3 workload regions and assigned a different slope to each. Emily began entering the structure into a separate worksheet. Claire noticed how little Marcus wrote. 12 lines at most. No sprawling proof. No attempt to impress the room. He seemed more interested in removing unnecessary terms than adding complicated ones. Where is the breakpoint? She asked. Marcus pointed to the raw distribution on Emily's screen. Start where the delay curve changes slope. Emily ran the calculation. Around 68% utilization. Marcus nodded. Use that as a first test, not as doctrine. Nathan crossed his arms. And if the result barely changes? Marcus looked at him. Then we learn the original assumption was harmless. And if it changes a lot? Then we learn it was not. Claire heard the answer and felt something in her resistance loosen. There was no triumph in him. No attempt to punish them for being wrong. Just a process. Emily entered the final values and launched the revised calculation. The laptop fan rose softly. The wall clock clicked to 9:51. Claire looked at Marcus. You said 15 minutes. For the classroom model. And this? Marcus glanced toward Emily's screen. This is the part nobody should rush. The solver finished. Emily stared at the result. Claire saw her expression before she saw the number. What? Claire asked. Emily swallowed. The projected efficiency gain drops by more than half under the restored data. Nathan stepped closer. Claire did too. Marcus remained by the board. Claire looked at the corrected output, then at the assumption she had written 6 weeks earlier. So the model was not just double-counting capacity. Marcus capped the marker. No, Claire looked at him. It was also rewarding us for deleting the periods when the system struggled most. Marcus held her gaze. That is what the data says. Claire kept staring at the revised output while the laptop fan slowed back to silence. The number was not dramatic by itself. That was what made it worse. The corrected efficiency gain looked ordinary enough to pass through a meeting without anyone questioning it. Yet it cut the projected benefit almost in half once the excluded high-volume periods were restored. "Run it again," Claire said. Emily did. Same result. Nathan leaned closer to the screen. "Change the breakpoint." Marcus shook his head. "Do not move the breakpoint because you dislike the answer." Nathan looked at him. "I am testing sensitivity." "Then test a range." Claire turned toward Emily. "Do that." Emily entered 3 alternative utilization thresholds, 1 below Marcus's estimate and 2 above it. The results shifted slightly, but stayed in the same direction. Claire folded her arms. "So the conclusion survives." Marcus nodded. "Within the range we tested." Nathan looked at the whiteboard. "That still leaves the original objective." Marcus uncapped the marker. "No, it gives us a better one." He erased the old fixed efficiency term and replaced it with the workload-dependent relationship they had just verified. Then he returned to the corrected capacity constraints from earlier and connected the 2 pieces. The mathematics was denser now, but Marcus did not rush. Once the efficiency term depends on workload, the optimum moves away from the corner we boxed before. Claire watched him trace the new boundary. "How far?" "Enough that the first answer is no longer optimal." Emily whispered. "So we solved the corrected wrong model." Marcus glanced toward her. "We solved the best model we had at the time." Claire heard the generosity in that sentence. He could have said they were wrong twice. He did not. Marcus wrote 3 candidate regions and reduced the nonlinear section into a piecewise approximation. Nathan stepped nearer despite himself. "That is going to create a kink here." Marcus nodded. "Which is why the optimum will probably sit near it." Claire looked at him. "Probably. I do not guess when the computer is sitting right there." For the first time all evening, Claire smiled without meaning to. Emily entered Marcus's revised structure. The solver started. Nobody spoke. The clock above the door read 10:03. The cold coffee beside Claire's laptop had formed a dark ring inside the paper cup. Marcus stood near the board with a faint streak of black marker on the side of his hand and the lemon-clean scent of his work shirt still following him. Behind him, the cleaning cart waited exactly where he had left it. The solver finished with a soft chime. Emily's eyes moved across the screen. It converged. Claire stepped forward. Result. Emily read the value, then compared it with Marcus's hand calculation. Same region. Difference is less than 0.1%. Nathan stared at the board. "You estimated that without running the full model?" Marcus shook his head. "I bounded it. The solver did the rest." Claire looked at the final number boxed on the screen, then at the board covered with Marcus's 12 clean lines. "So now it is solved." Marcus took a breath. "Now the model is internally consistent with the data we actually checked tonight." Claire turned toward him. "That sounds like a very careful way to say yes." "It is a careful way to say we should not pretend tonight answer questions we did not test." Emily leaned back and smiled. Someone near the middle row began clapping once, then stopped when nobody joined. The room felt too quiet for applause. Nathan looked toward Claire. "Well, Professor." A few students remembered at the same time. Claire did too. Her joke from earlier seemed to return from another version of the room. Nathan raised one eyebrow. "You did make a promise." Several students laughed softly. Claire's face warmed. Before she could answer, Marcus placed the marker on the tray. "A joke is not a contract." The laughter faded. Claire looked at him. He had every reason to let the room embarrass her. Instead, he had just given her a way out. "Thank you," she said quietly. Marcus glanced toward the cleaning cart. "I still have a floor to finish." Claire looked from the cart to the equations he had just rewritten. "Before you go, I need to ask you something." Marcus stopped. Claire's voice had changed. There was no challenge in it now. "Who are you?" Marcus rested one hand on the cleaning cart and looked at Claire as if the question itself needed clarification. "Marcus Reed." Claire gave a small nod. "I know your name." "Then what are you asking?" The room had begun to loosen around them. A few students were closing laptops. Someone near the door slipped a notebook into a backpack. But nobody left. Claire looked at the equations covering the board, then at the facilities badge clipped near Marcus's waist. "I am asking how you do this." Marcus glanced toward the clock. 10:11. The same way anyone does. Study. Practice. Get things wrong. Fix them. Nathan looked toward him. You did not learn that from a maintenance manual. Marcus's expression stayed calm. No, Emily closed her laptop halfway. Where did you study? Marcus hesitated. He seemed less comfortable with this question than he had been with the entire model. State school first, then a master's in applied mathematics. Claire's eyes sharpened. Where? Northeastern. A few students exchanged looks. Nathan stopped moving. Claire stared at him. You have a graduate degree in applied mathematics? Yes. And you work nights in facilities? Marcus looked toward the trash bag he had tied earlier. Also yes. The answer carried no apology. Claire lowered her voice. Why? Marcus looked at the board before answering. My father had a stroke during my doctoral program. I left to help at home. Medical bills came first. Research did not. The room went quiet again, but this silence felt different from the earlier ones. Less shocked. More ashamed. Marcus continued before anyone could turn the moment into pity. Facilities hired quickly. The schedule worked. I stayed. Claire looked down. You were in a doctoral program? For a while. Optimization. Mostly operations research and nonlinear systems. Nathan's face changed completely now. The same man who had laughed at Marcus 20 minutes earlier looked suddenly unsure where to put his hands. Claire exhaled slowly. If I had known that before, I would have listened differently. Marcus turned toward her. That is the problem. Claire looked up. He did not sound angry. That made the sentence harder to escape. What do you mean? Marcus picked up the black marker from the tray and held it loosely between two fingers. If the mathematics is correct, my resume should not make it more correct. Claire said nothing. Marcus tapped the side of the marker against his palm. And if the mathematics is wrong, a degree should not make it less wrong. Emily looked down at her closed laptop. Nathan stared at the floor. Claire felt the weight of every glance she had made toward the cleaning cart before she had looked at his equations. You are right, she said. Marcus gave a small nod. About the model? About me. The words came out quieter. Claire looked at him directly. I saw the uniform first. Marcus held her gaze. Most people do. That does not make it acceptable. No, the fluorescent lights hummed above them. Somewhere down the hall, an automatic door clicked shut. Claire looked back at the whiteboard, at the 12 lines that had corrected hours of work. I owe you an apology. Marcus slid the marker back onto the tray. For laughing. For assuming the laugh was safe because of who I thought you were. Marcus was silent for a moment. Then he said, that is closer. Claire nodded. She did not defend herself. And the marriage joke? A few students looked up again, nervous laughter threatening to return. Marcus glanced toward the room. Still not a contract. Claire almost smiled. Good. Marcus reached for the cleaning cart. Then I should finish my shift. Claire watched him turn away, then looked again at the revised model. Marcus. He stopped. Would you come back tomorrow? He looked over his shoulder. For what? Claire pointed to the assumption they had exposed. Not to clean. Marcus's expression did not change. Claire added, to help us find out what else we assumed before we earned the right to. Marcus returned the next afternoon at 4:30, 20 minutes before the research group was scheduled to meet. He was not wearing his facilities uniform. A dark blue button-down shirt replaced the polo, but the same identification badge hung from his belt because his shift would begin later that evening. Claire was already in the seminar room with Emily, reviewing the restored dataset on the large screen. Nathan sat near the far end of the table, unusually quiet. When Marcus entered, Claire stood. Thank you for coming. Marcus looked at the board. Most of his equations from the night before were still there, faint marker shadows around the sections someone had erased. You kept the model. I kept the questions. Claire gestured toward an empty chair. Marcus did not sit immediately. What exactly do you want me to do? Claire answered without hesitation. Challenge the assumptions. All of them. Nathan looked up. Claire nodded. All of them. Marcus finally sat. For the next 40 minutes, they worked through the model line by line. This time nobody laughed when he asked where a number came from. Nobody asked whether a term was obvious. Emily opened source files before Marcus had to request them. Nathan still defended several choices, but he defended them with documentation instead of status. Marcus noticed the difference. So did Claire. At 5:20, she closed her laptop. I looked up your old work. Marcus stopped writing. Why? Because I wanted to understand your background. You already asked me. I know. Claire folded her hands. I found your master's thesis. Marcus's expression tightened slightly. That was a long time ago. 7 years. Long enough. Claire looked at him. You were working on constrained optimization under unstable demand. Marcus gave a small nod. Related area? Nathan leaned forward. That explains last night. Marcus turned toward him. Does it? Nathan hesitated. It explains why you saw the structure so quickly. Marcus rested his pen on the table. Maybe. Claire heard the restraint in his voice. You do not like us using the resume to make last night make sense. I do not mind context. Marcus looked at her. I mind when context becomes permission to believe the evidence. Claire said nothing. He continued. Last night, before you knew my degree, I had to prove I belonged near the board before anyone would check whether the equation was right. After you learned the degree, everyone relaxed. Emily looked down. Nathan did too. Claire did not. You are right. Marcus leaned back. That is not an accusation. It is a pattern. Claire nodded slowly. One I participated in. Yes. The honesty sat between them without heat. Claire looked toward the cleaning cart parked outside the glass wall in the hallway, waiting for Marcus's evening shift. I keep thinking about that. Marcus followed her gaze. The cart. What it made me assume. It did not make you assume anything. Claire looked back at him. Marcus's voice stayed calm. It gave you something easy to organize me with. Claire absorbed that. Before she could answer, the seminar room door opened. Professor Leonard Price, the department chair, stepped inside carrying a red folder and wearing the tired expression of someone who had just come from a difficult meeting. Claire, I need the revised model. He stopped when he noticed Marcus at the table. I am sorry. I did not realize you had company. Claire stood. Leonard, this is Marcus Reed. He found the capacity error and the data problem. Price looked at Marcus, then at Claire. The facilities employee? The room went still. Claire's face changed. The mathematician who found the errors, she said. Price glanced at the screen. Then I need both of you to hear this. He placed the red folder on the table. That model was not only for the seminar. Marcus looked at Claire. Price opened the folder. It is the anonymized core of the optimization framework we submit to the grant committee on Monday. Leonard Price kept one hand on the red folder as if the weight of it had increased since he entered the room. The committee sees this Monday morning, he said. The funding decision affects 3 years of work. Claire looked at the revised equations still covering the board. Then we do not submit the old model. Price frowned. How serious is the error? Nathan answered first. The capacity term was duplicated and the efficiency assumption was based on filtered data. Price's eyes moved toward Marcus. And he found both? Claire nodded. Yes. Marcus looked at the folder. Is the grant version identical to what we tested? Price hesitated. Mostly. Marcus's expression changed. Mostly is not identical. Claire caught the shift immediately. What is different? Price opened the folder and removed a printed appendix. The grant model includes a projected scaling factor for year 2 and year 3. We removed it from the seminar version because it involved sponsor data. Marcus did not reach for the pages. Am I authorized to see that? Price looked surprised. Claire answered before he could. Not yet. Marcus pushed his chair back slightly. Then do not show it to me. Nathan glanced at him. You just rebuilt half the model. That does not give me permission to see restricted data. Price studied Marcus for a second, then closed the appendix. We can anonymize the inputs. Marcus nodded. Keep only what is needed to test the structure. Claire looked at him differently again. Not because of the mathematics this time. Because he understood where expertise stopped. 20 minutes later, Emily returned with a sanitized version containing only the scaling relationship, workload bands, capacity limits, and normalized output values. Marcus read the first page slowly. This scaling factor assumes service efficiency improves as volume rises. Claire nodded. That came from our pilot data. Marcus looked at her. The same pilot data with the high delay cases removed? Silence. Claire's face tightened. Possibly. Nathan shook his head. The scaling assumption was developed separately. Marcus pointed to the source code beside the parameter. Same dataset identifier. Emily checked. He is right. Price exhaled. What does that mean? Marcus leaned back. It means the model may be using the same optimistic filtering twice. Once to improve current efficiency, then again to justify future scaling. Claire looked at the screen. Can we test it tonight? Marcus nodded. If the raw pilot data is available. Emily opened the archive. It was. They restored the excluded records, rebuilt the scaling relationship by workload band, and reran the forecast. The projected year 3 improvement fell sharply. Price stared at the result. That will hurt the grant case. Marcus looked at him. It will hurt the version built on an assumption the data does not support. Claire folded her arms. Leonard, we cannot present the old result. Price looked at the clock, then at the red folder. The committee expects a complete model Monday. Marcus spoke quietly. Then give them a complete explanation. Price's eyes narrowed. You understand what is at stake? Yes. Do you? Price asked. There are salaries tied to this. Student funding. Research positions. Marcus held his gaze. That is why the assumption should be stronger, not weaker. Claire looked at the board. The room felt colder despite the fluorescent lights. Price rubbed one hand across his forehead. Who put the scaling factor into the model? Emily looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Claire. Claire was already staring at the parameter. I did, she said. The words were quiet. Price turned toward her. Claire did not look away. 6 weeks ago, I approved it after reviewing the pilot summary. Marcus said nothing. Claire looked at him. You were right to question it. Price closed the red folder. We need to decide what goes in front of the committee. Marcus glanced toward the cleaning cart visible through the glass wall. That decision is yours. Claire shook her head. No. The evidence already made part of it for us. Price looked from Claire to Marcus, then back to the revised forecast on Emily's screen. If we walk into that committee and tell them the model changed this much 48 hours before review, they're going to ask why. Claire answered before anyone else could. Because I approved an assumption before the supporting data was strong enough. Nathan shifted in his chair. Claire, you do not need to say it like that. She turned toward him. How should I say it? Nathan hesitated. Say the pilot methodology changed. Marcus looked at him. Did it? Nathan said nothing. Price closed the red folder again. We need to be careful about language. Marcus nodded. Yes. Claire looked at him, almost expecting agreement with Price. Marcus continued. Careful does not mean vague. The room went still. Price rubbed his thumb along the folder edge. What would you recommend? Marcus glanced at the board, then at Claire. Do not present the corrected model tonight. Claire frowned. Why not? Because we have tested enough to know the old assumption is weak. We have not tested enough to know the replacement is stable across every grant scenario. Price exhaled slowly. So we delay? You verify. Marcus pointed toward Emily's laptop. Run the restored dataset through the full grant structure. Test the scaling relationship under several workload bands. Document every adjustment. Then present what survives. Claire studied him. And if the committee asks who found the problem? Marcus looked at her. Tell them. That is not what I meant. She lowered her voice. If I walk into that room and say a facilities employee found 2 structural problems in a model I approved, Leonard is right. People will ask questions. Marcus held her gaze. They should. Claire's face tightened, but he was not finished. Questions are not humiliation. She looked down at the table. Marcus spoke more softly. Humiliation would be me standing in front of them before the work is verified and using your mistake to make myself look smarter. Claire looked up. You could. Yes. After the way I treated you, some people would say you earned it. Marcus glanced toward the cleaning cart outside the glass wall. That is not how evidence works. Price watched him carefully. Marcus continued. The model is wrong where the data does not support it. You were wrong to dismiss me before checking the mathematics. Those are separate facts. I do not need to combine them into revenge. No one spoke for several seconds. Emily looked down at her hands. Nathan's expression softened for the first time all evening. Claire leaned against the edge of the table. Then what do you want? Marcus answered immediately. A clean model. That is all. For tonight. Claire almost smiled, but her eyes had gone glassy with something closer to shame than relief. You are protecting me. Marcus shook his head. No, it feels like it. I am protecting the work from becoming personal. Claire absorbed that. Price reopened the red folder. We can run an internal validation tomorrow morning. Marcus nodded. Good. And if the corrected assumptions hold, then Claire presents them. Price looked surprised. Not you. Marcus looked at Claire. It is her grant. Claire stared back at him. And if they ask who caught the error? Marcus picked up the black marker from the tray and rolled it once between his fingers. Then tell them who caught it. Claire nodded slowly. I will. Marcus placed the marker down. And tell them who approved the assumption. Claire did not look away. I will. The answer came without hesitation. Marcus reached for his facilities badge and clipped it back into place before heading toward the hallway. Claire watched him move toward the cleaning cart. Marcus. He stopped. Why are you making this easier for me? He looked back at her. I am not. Claire frowned. Marcus rested one hand on the cart handle. I am making it honest. By Monday morning, the corrected grant model had survived 3 rounds of internal validation, 2 independent reruns, and a final review by Leonard Price that lasted past sunrise. The new forecast was less flattering than the version Claire had planned to present, but every assumption now had a source, every exclusion had a reason, and every sensitivity test was documented. Marcus was not in the committee room when Claire began. He had asked not to be. If the work is strong, he had told her, it should not need me standing beside it. Claire stood before the grant committee with the revised model projected behind her and Nathan, Emily, and Price seated along the side wall. She did not soften the explanation. Before review, we identified 2 material problems in the model. The first was a duplicated capacity term. The second was an efficiency assumption based on filtered data that excluded a disproportionate number of high workload cases. One committee member looked over his glasses. Who identified the issues? Claire felt every easy answer pass through her mind and let each one go. Marcus Reed did. Research staff. No, Claire held the silence. He currently works nights in university facilities. He also holds a master's degree in applied mathematics and previously completed doctoral research in optimization. Another member leaned forward. And who approved the efficiency assumption? Claire did not look toward Price. I did. The room stayed quiet. That was my error. Nathan lowered his eyes. Emily watched Claire without moving. Claire continued. Marcus did not ask me to say that. In fact, he insisted we verify the correction before presenting anything. The revised model on this screen is the version the evidence supports. Questions followed for nearly an hour. Claire answered what she knew, admitted what remained uncertain, and never once used Marcus as a shield. When the committee recessed, Price waited until the door closed. You did not have to make that as personal as you did. Claire gathered her papers. It was personal the moment I assumed the man cleaning the room was less qualified to challenge the board. Price said nothing. That afternoon, Claire found Marcus in an empty classroom replacing marker trays before his shift began. The committee accepted the revised submission for continued review, she said. Marcus nodded. Good. They also asked about you. He kept arranging the markers. That sounds dangerous. Claire almost smiled. Leonard wants to offer you a research position. Marcus stopped. Offer. Quantitative research analyst. Funded through the department. Marcus looked at her carefully. Because of last week? Because of what you demonstrated. That is still last week. Claire understood. What would make it acceptable? Marcus set the tray down. Is there an existing hiring process? Yes. Technical assessment? Yes. References? Yes. Same scoring rubric as other candidates. Claire nodded. Yes. Marcus folded his arms. Then put me through it. Marcus, you already solved a problem the department could not. One model. His voice stayed calm. I do not want a rescue job. Claire looked at him. It is not charity. Then proving that should be easy. She nodded slowly. Same assessment. Same standards. And if I fail? Claire took a breath. Then you do not get the job. Marcus smiled for the first time that day. Good. Claire shook her head. You are the only person I know who looks relieved hearing that. Because now the result belongs to the work. 3 weeks later, Marcus passed the technical assessment with one of the highest scores in the applicant pool. The department completed references, interviews, and a formal review before extending the offer again. This time he accepted. On his final night assigned to Harrington Hall, he pushed the cleaning cart past the seminar room and stopped beside the whiteboard. Claire was inside erasing the last faded equations from the original workshop. She held up the black marker he had used that night. You want this? Marcus looked at it, then at her. Keep it. Why? He glanced toward the faint line still visible beneath the cleaned board. So next time someone unexpected says the model is wrong, you remember to check before you laugh. Claire lowered the marker. I will. Marcus nodded. Then it did its job. 6 months later, Marcus stood beneath the warm lights of the university's public mathematics auditorium wearing a dark navy suit and holding the same black marker Claire had once offered him as a challenge. His facilities badge was gone. In its place was a research identification card that listed him as a quantitative research analyst, and inside his briefcase sat an acceptance letter allowing him to resume doctoral study part-time in the fall. His research position now reported through an independent analytics center under Leonard Price, not through Claire's faculty group, a boundary Marcus had insisted on before accepting any personal invitation from her outside work. Claire stood at the lectern and looked across the crowded room. Our speaker tonight holds a master's degree in applied mathematics, has worked in optimization and nonlinear systems, and recently helped redesign a workload model now being used across several university research projects. She paused. Marcus watched her carefully. 6 months earlier, she might have added that he had been a janitor. She did not. Please welcome Marcus Reed. The applause rose as Marcus walked toward the board. Claire handed him the marker without ceremony. Their eyes met for one quiet second. Show them, she said. Marcus smiled. That sounds familiar. His lecture was not about the night they met. It was about assumptions. He showed how a model could be elegant and still fail because the world inside it had been simplified too aggressively. He asked students where the data came from before asking what the solver returned. He made them defend exclusions, definitions, and boundaries. When one student apologized for asking what she called a basic question, Marcus shook his head. A basic question can expose an expensive assumption. Claire sat in the front row with a notebook open on her lap. She wrote that sentence down. After the auditorium emptied, Marcus carried his briefcase through Harrington Hall. Claire walked beside him. The building was quieter now, filled with the familiar hum of ventilation and the faint smell of floor cleaner. They passed the seminar room where everything had started. The whiteboard had been replaced months earlier, but one faint black stain remained near the lower corner where the old surface had resisted cleaning. Claire stopped at the doorway. Apparently, I still owe you something. Marcus looked at her. An apology was enough. I was not thinking about the apology. He raised one eyebrow. Claire smiled. Coffee. Marcus glanced at the clock above the hallway. 7:12. That sounds less legally complicated than your first offer. Claire laughed, then covered her mouth as if the sound surprised her. I deserve that. Probably. She looked through the glass toward the empty room. I still think about the way I looked at your uniform before I looked at the board. Marcus was quiet. Claire continued. I used to tell myself I believed in merit. What I actually believed in was merit after the right institution had labeled it for me. Marcus looked at her. You change what you do with that. I am trying. That matters more. A facilities employee pushed a cleaning cart past them and nodded politely. Claire returned the nod without looking away too quickly, without turning the person into scenery. Marcus noticed. He did not comment. They walked toward the exit together. Outside, Boston evening light reflected across the wet sidewalk, soft and silver after an afternoon rain. Claire held the door open. So, coffee. Marcus stepped through. Coffee. She followed him outside. And just to be clear, no promises attached. Marcus smiled. Good. I prefer terms with evidence. Claire laughed again. Behind them, the seminar room lights clicked off automatically. The faint marker stain remained on the board, almost invisible unless someone knew where to look. Months earlier, Claire had thought a cleaning uniform told her where Marcus belonged. In the end, the mathematics had not changed when she learned his resume. Only the way she learned to see the person holding the marker.